So Genji's a character with a lot of one-tricks and a lot of mains, and overall, a lot of people that like watching Genji or playing Genji. But with that as well comes a lot of toxicity going towards Genji players, and today I kind of want to talk about that and why it seems like in so many of your games as Genji or while playing with a Genji, the Genji will get flamed. With all that said though, let's get started. So the first thing I want to talk about with Genji, and I think the most important piece of this puzzle, is the fact that Genji is a very mechanically intensive character. When you compare Genji to a lot of other characters, it simply takes more inputs per second playing Genji than other people, and it takes more difficult decisions per game than a lot of other characters. For example, as Reinhardt, you still have to be good at timing your shield and still be good at playing in the front line, but Genji has to decide where to be, when to be there. Should he be flanking? Should he be playing with his front line? Should he be protecting his back line? And as well, of course, the mechanics, where it's just you have to be good at flick shotting, regular shooting, aiming, predicting your shots with the projectile, and all the mobility that comes with Genji as well. Overall, when you look at this character, there is a lot that Genji can do, and a lot of mechanics, and overall, just a lot of potential with the character. But I think the thing that really makes a lot of people dislike Genji players is the fact that he is such a mechanically difficult hero, and a lot of people, I think, overestimate what lower ranked Genjis will do. I mean, if you look at the top Genjis, if you look at Shadowburn and the like, of course they're gonna pull out the majority of the good from Genji's kit, and his kit does have a lot of good and a lot of potential. But for a lot of other people, sure, there might be potential there of mechanics that he could happen to pull off if he was a little better, but a lot of people won't be able to do that. A lot of people will dive into the enemy backline as Genji and not get a kill, and maybe even die right there. And I think that's kind of a problem about him, because there's a lot to kind of hope for with your Genji on your team, but a lot of the times you can't really expect too much. And the fact that he's just such a mechanically difficult hero being played in such low ranks, I think that can kind of tell why a lot of people dislike having one of them on their team, because a lot of people aren't really mechanically ready yet, but still picking him up anyways because he's a fun character. And I would agree, he's a fun character. I mean, play whoever you want, but that could be a reason why some people might dislike you playing Genji. Now, the second thing I wanted to talk about was kind of similar to that, and I guess a reason why there's Genjis with such bad mechanics, but still in pretty high ranks. Let's say Platinum, Diamond, maybe even very low Masters. Oftentimes you're going to get into a game here with the Genji main, but the mechanics really aren't the best. And a lot of the times you're wondering, how is that? Well, it could be that they're just really good at timing and positioning, and maybe that's pulling it off for them. Maybe shot calls as well. But I think for a lot of Genji players in low to mid ranks, or even, bottom of high ranks, a lot of them kind of just get by at the very end finishing off kills with swift strike, or mainly by getting good ultimates. And that's what a lot of Genjis do. They spam at the enemy, poke damage, get a good ult, wait until it's a good time, and then go in with that. And honestly, Genji's ultimate isn't way too hard to pull off, especially if you're at a lower rank where most people aren't playing characters that will counter him, or aren't playing a team comp that can actually beat Genji, and they won't switch to that. And yeah, he goes in, expects to have a great time, kills a lot of people, and that is kind of what happens. And a lot of people actually rank up by doing that with Genji. But I think the problem with this is that a lot of the times people expect that you as a Genji player at this rank can do a lot more than simply get good ultimates. And while getting good ultimates, I think, is an important, skill to have as Genji, and probably one of the most important, especially in competitive solo queue, I think it kind of makes sense why some people might be slightly disappointed by the rest of your play if you are mainly focusing on getting ultimates, when again, you see better players getting picks by themselves without their ultimate, pushing up the cart really quickly, and overall just doing more with less. But, maybe that's not always the problem, and maybe that's not why you're getting flamed. Another reason why you might be getting flamed as Genji, or why you might be flaming a Genji, is that he isn't seemingly getting out all that much damage. And, I mean, he's playing DPS. Where's the damage going? I mean, what's happening? And I guess in a lot of cases, people just think my Genji is useless. I mean, he's not doing anything. He's not getting as much damage as a soldier, or a Junkrat, or a Pharah, or really anything. So he's just a bad player. I think a lot of people kind of get that misconception, and they kind of believe that every character in the game can always do damage just very well, as long as they're a DPS character. But I'm going to say with Genji, he's kind of awkward because a lot of the times you can't really get out that much damage unless a fight is going on. I mean, if you have consistent fights and consistent dives over and over again, Genji's going to always be in there and be in his effective range. He's going to be able to finish off kills with a swift strike, get nice headshots with his projectiles, and kill people, then kill more people, and finally kill the most people with his ultimate. It's all great with that. But if you have like a poke comp or a slow push comp or anything like that, and a Genji, yeah, your Genji's not going to be doing way too much, because if you're not engaging, you're essentially forcing Genji to play 1v6 and hope that he can get a pick. Or on the other hand, hoping that Genji will just stay back, throw shurikens, and charge up his ultimate. And those are kind of the two options you're often giving your Genji in that case. So he can just kind of be screwed from getting out a lot of damage. And if you have gold damage while you have a Genji on your team, you know, I'm not going to say that it's way too hard to do, because especially with characters like D.Va, you can always be engaged. You can always be in the front line. You can always be getting out a lot of damage. Maybe not elims, but damage. But with Genji, sometimes with certain team comps and against certain team comps, it's kind of hard to make yourself useful in that way, especially if your teammates aren't really playing around you. But I know what you're going to say. Hey, whenever I watch great GM players playing Genji, I mean, they can always do well. They can always get damage. And no matter what the team comp is, they're still popping off every single game. And yeah, there is the opportunity to do that as Genji on every single map and against every single team comp, I guess. But it's very hard to pull off right without just having your Genji go out and kill themselves. And I think a lot of people have to kind of remember that, yes, there are a ton of god tier Genji players that can go out and do that and can always be effective no matter what the situation is. But for the people in your current rank, it might be kind of harder for them to know where to be, know when to be there. And honestly, you will probably be happier by your Genji staying next to you, spamming out damage, and maybe not doing the most, but at least staying alive, than going in again and again by himself and just kind of throwing the match in that way. I know it's kind of hard to keep in mind because, yes, again, Genji does have the potential to always be useful, but for most players, it is hard to pull out that potential, especially if the situation's just not going way too well for him. And I guess one of those situations that I should mention is map and team comp. Because unlike Tracer, Genji can't really do everything on every single map. I mean, Tracer can go around, flank, her mobility is just insane, she can one clip, and she works quite well on every map with just about every team comp. And if your team comp's slow pushing, she can stay near the front line, get out a lot of damage on the tanks. If your team comp's diving, she can do well in that case. But again, with Genji, he is kind of unique, as I was talking about earlier, which is, I guess, kind of a problem. And one thing that I think you should definitely keep in mind is that some maps in particular, Genji just can't do way too great in. I mean, if the map is super open, like let's say First Point Junkertown, sometimes they can pull off some nice stuff there. But a lot of the times, it's just hard for you to do anything because he has to use his gap closer to gap close instead of get damage out. He'll have no combo left and just feel kind of useless. So kind of remember that. Sometimes your Genjis might not be doing much because the situation around them isn't that great. And sometimes you might be the player that could fix that situation. Let's say you're playing a support. Maybe you could go Lucio, help him get next to the enemies. Maybe you could go Winston to create some space for him to get in there, or D.Va, or anything like that. I'm not going to say you should always switch to accommodate your teammates that are just not switching themselves. Because yes, if a Genji is not doing anything, he should be switching. But, I mean, if you have a Genji that won't switch and won't do anything, that is kind of how you can deal with that and make him feel a lot more useful in your team in those situations. And I guess the final thing I want to talk about with Genji is the fact that I see a lot of Genji players getting flamed for going out and killing themselves. And I'm going to say, yes, it is bad that a lot of Genjis will do this. Obviously, you don't want your Genji to just get picked again and again and again. But a thing you kind of have to realize about flankers is that they oftentimes will have to risk themselves to get kills, to get picks, to win that point or that match, or they can just stay next to you and not really do that much. Those are the two main options, and oftentimes the flankers will be pressured into going in, trying to get picks, trying to get kills, going into the enemy backline, and that's what they should be doing in a lot of cases. But sometimes they will risk their own life and it won't pay off and they'll die, and sometimes that happens 2 or 3 times. And if that happens to you, just remember that, yeah, flankers do have a risk that inherently is going in. I guess you could flame them if you wanted to. I mean, they do kind of deserve it because, you know, they died. But I think that's not really going to help you way too much. And instead of just immediately calling them trash, maybe say, hey Genji, next time I'll call out when the front line is going to dive in. All of our tanks will go in. And you can then go around and maybe pick someone in the back line while the enemy team isn't paying attention. And if you do that, make the call out, it might work. It is kind of hard, but that might be something that you have to try out. Overall, I'm just going to say in the end, yeah, flankers do have inherent risk, and I think that's the #1 reason why people think that a lot of them are trash, because sometimes you just will die because you're in a really bad situation. And I guess there's that. But anyways, as always, guys, thank you all for watching. That's all I'm going to say about Genji mains today. I think there are a lot of good Genji mains in the game, and personally, I do really enjoy watching and playing Genji. I mean, maybe I'm not the best at it myself, but I just kind of wanted to go over why it seems like so many of them are inherently just trash players in a lot of your games. With all that said, though, guys, thank you all for watching. Hope you enjoyed. As always, if you did, make sure to leave a like or comment down below your own opinions about Genji. And as always, guys, have a wonderful day.